This, of course, is my favorite subject. There's no better way, no way I'd prefer to start the day than talking about Bitcoin and why there is no second best. I had an occasion to consider this phrase as I prepared this presentation, and I just thought it resonated across so many different dimensions. And so I started considering, what is the best idea, right? What is the best? And I think that in the modern era, in the 21st century, I think we can agree that the best idea has been digital transformation. And the companies that have reshaped the world over the past 30 years are Microsoft and Apple and Google and Facebook and NVIDIA, and they stand for digital books and digital entertainment and digital intelligence and digital communications and digital memories. And of course, as they dematerialize those products, as our recorders drop away or dematerialize and our CDs and our libraries dematerialize, and as our services dematerialize, there's just a massive amount of economic energy that's been given out. There's an extraordinary amount of efficiency. Now you can give a book to 1 billion people, or you can give Beethoven's Ninth Symphony to 1 billion people, and you can do it for the cost of some incremental electricity. And the big winners were the investors in these companies, and the companies themselves became, as powerful as nation states. Now, how good an idea is digital transformation? Well, it's good enough that in many years, 100% of the return for the S&P are attributable to just 7 companies. 1% of the companies have all the result. In other words, if you're not doing this, then you're just working very hard, and working harder just doesn't get ahead. This is a snapshot in the year 2023, and it just shows you, A, how good that idea is, and B, just how much trouble you're in if you're not actually surfing a digital wave here. 7 companies have all the returns in the S&P index. 493 companies return nothing. Okay? This is not a value judgment. The truth is, probably the people that work for the 493 companies worked harder. They worked harder. They're probably smarter. They got paid less. And they're taking an extraordinary beating and a burden on their back, trying to fight against a digital wave. But life isn't fair, and certainly the global economy isn't fair. If you're the winner, you're the winner, and if you get on the wrong side of a trend, then you just get gradually crushed. So this is a sobering observation, but it's a reminder that if you're going to invest, and if you're going to align yourself with an idea, it better be the best idea, because the second best idea, as you can see, is worth nothing. You'll be lucky if you just stay in business. So, what's the best digital transformation idea? Digital capital is the best digital transformation, right? I mean, for 30 years, we've been transforming books and records and email or letters and packages and pictures and VHS cassettes and the like. But that's all digital information. Digital information it's interesting. It does create enormous value, but the truth is, the first 30 years of digital transformation will be an order of magnitude less important than the next 30 years of digital transformation. And the real bull here, the extraordinary opportunity, is the digital transformation of capital, the digital transformation of property, the digital transformation of money. And if you want to be a physicist and be deep about this, it's the digital transformation of matter and energy. Not the digital transformation of information, but the digital transformation of matter and energy. And where are we? Well, I mean, first of all, you're talking about $900 trillion of assets that are in the analog world. So I don't know what Apple's worth or what Microsoft is worth, but, you know, books weren't worth $900 trillion when they transformed them, and nor were CD records worth $900 trillion. As of today, 0.1% of the capital in the world is digital. 99.9% is this, right? We're very early in the digital transformation cycle of capital, right? The world is living in analog assets. We have analog money, we have analog bonds, we have analog real estate, we have analog equity, we have analog art. A lot of analog stuff. $900 trillion of it, but the $900 trillion doesn't just reflect the value of the physical stuff. It reflects a monetary premium over and above the utility value of the stuff. People buy real estate not just to live in, they buy real estate as a store of value. And they buy equities not just because they want to capture the cash flows of the company. They buy equities because they want a store of value and they feel like it's preferable to holding cash. And for 500 years, people have been buying art as a store of value. It was scarce, desirable, portable property. If you had to leave the city, you could take it with you. And gold is the same thing. People have been buying gold as a store of value. So something like half of all this capital is really a monetary premium. And the other half may be a utility. We are just 1 trillion out of the 900 trillion right now. Very early. Crypto proof of work is the best way to create digital capital. The world wants digital capital. What's the best way to do it? Crypto proof of work. That is to say, when you're running a proof of work mining operation that converts energy into information that can be secured and transferred via cryptography. Not all crypto is based on proof of work, and therefore not all crypto is digital capital. A lot of it just looks like a digital security. But what's special about this particular approach, which is, of course, the Bitcoin architecture, is it creates a decentralized asset. It creates a physical asset. There's a physical linkage to the real world via the electricity and the silicon that makes it thermodynamically sound and integrates it into the universe and not just the metaverse. It's sovereign. You can take custody of this. It's egalitarian. The protocol is open. Anybody, anywhere on Earth can engage in this network. It's permissionless. It's global, right? This is the best idea, the best way to create digital capital. What's the best crypto proof of work asset? Bitcoin is the best. How good is it? It's 97% of all of the market cap of crypto proof of work. After Bitcoin, you have to go all the way down to Dogecoin, literally a joke created over the weekend by an engineer as a joke to find the second best. Obviously, there is no second best proof of work asset. But you know what? There's no second best crypto. Bitcoin's the best crypto asset. Now, why is it the best crypto asset? Because it's increasingly clear that no other crypto token is going to achieve institutional acceptance this decade. Bitcoin is the only crypto that's going to cross the chasm. You could see the writing on the wall when the spot ETF of Bitcoin was approved in January. By the end of May, you'll know that Ethereum is not going to be approved. And when Ethereum is not going to be approved, sometime this summer, it'll be very clear to everyone that Ethereum is deemed a crypto asset security, not a commodity. After that, you're going to see that Ethereum, BNB, Solana, Ripple, Cardano, everything down the stack is just a crypto asset security unregistered. None of them will ever be wrapped by a spot ETF. None of them will be accepted by Wall Street. None of them will be accepted by mainstream institutional investors as crypto assets. This is the one universal, consensus accepted institutional grade crypto asset in the world. There won't be another one this decade. I can't speak to 20, 30, 40, 50 years out. Anything can happen that far out. But between the year 2024 and the year 2030, the die is cast, the writing is on the wall. This is the winner. There is no second best. And Bitcoin is the best crypto network. It's not just the best crypto asset. This asset is secured by the most powerful computer network in the world. It's rapidly growing stronger. Hash rate's growing by 70% a year. It's growing that fast in bull markets and bear markets. It's an unstoppable thing. How much is 624 exahash? It's enough that all of the computer power of Microsoft or Amazon is not going to outdo this, right? This is a silicon machine, because the genius of an open crypto proof of work network is that very intelligent engineers can harness the power of ASIC chips to create orders of magnitude more efficiency in SHA-256 hashing. So the silicon ratchet is 2,000 to 1, 3,000 to 1 more powerful than a general purpose CPU. A GPU is not appropriate and is not capable of doing this. It's not the right technique, so you're not threatened by all the GPU capacity. And what you have here is enough hash power to create a wall of encrypted energy that's nation-state resistant, that's corporate resistant, that's Dr. Evil resistant, that's hacker resistant. There is no trick, there is no gimmick, there is no social attack. This is just raw digital power standing in the way of anybody that would try to undermine the integrity of the network. And it's also driven by electricity, 20 gigawatts of electricity, 20 full-on nuclear reactors worth of electricity. But it's a lot better than 20 full-on nuclear reactors, because this electricity is spread everywhere to the ends of the earth. The network is feeding on electricity, and that creates a decentralizing dynamic that drives all of the network to the end of the grid in the quest of stranded energy. So this network and the dynamic is going to continually decentralize, continually dissipate. It's going to continually move away from population centers where the electricity is expensive. It's going to move to places where the electricity is stranded, where it needs to be recycled. And that 30 gigawatts is going to create a thermodynamic connection between the virtual network and the physical world. This is what makes the network stable. This is what makes the network ethical. This is what makes the network politically sound. The fact that electricity is going to be coming off of a dam in Bhutan or a volcano in South America or Africa means that this is going to be a global neutral asset. There's no way anybody's going to centralize the Bitcoin network on top of a single data center. That's what makes Bitcoin the best crypto network. Now, beyond that, Bitcoin's the best crypto brand. Why is it the best crypto brand? Well, 220 million Bitcoin holders, people that have an economic interest in Bitcoin. 420 million crypto users around the world. The crypto industry has been aggressively marketing and aggressively expanding on the backs of lots of different use cases, not just Bitcoin as store of value or property, but also cryptocurrencies, stable coins, NFTs, everything under the sun. And this continues to grow. It's a incredibly aggressive, fast-growing, creative market. The marketing is extraordinary. But there's an important point to be made here. As the other crypto assets fail because of competition, right? As the Solana competes with Ethereum, competes with whatever, as they fail due to regulation, as they get shut down or they get labeled unregistered securities by regulators, as they fail due to entropy, just the complexity of what they're attempting to accomplish, and they crash or they get hacked or they unwind, or as people move away from their projects, as those failures take place, all the users in the crypto ecosystem and all the capital in the crypto ecosystem is going to flow into the best network. It's going to flow into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has 100% crypto acceptance. If you talk to everybody in the world and you say, well, do you like crypto? Yeah, I do. Well, is Bitcoin legitimate? What's the most secure, what's the most credible crypto network? Well, it's Bitcoin. Bitcoin's the O positive, right? It's the universal donor, right? Everybody can't agree on anything else. If you talk to people in the crypto ecosystem and you ask them whether or not they like Solana better than this, or Tether better than that, or NFTs better than this, they can't agree on that. That's competitive, that's controversial, that's confusing. Everybody agrees on this one thing, Bitcoin. Bitcoin will be around for the long term. The industry was built on it. It'll be around long after most of the other industry participants are gone. Well, Bitcoin's not just the best crypto brand. It's the best investment brand. There is no second best investment brand. People know about the dollar, but dollar's not an investment unless you're in a country with the currency collapsing. And if the currency's not collapsing, then you need a different investment. Okay, Bitcoin's the most widely held investment asset in the world, right? People are coming to grips with that. I travel all over the world. I get on the runway in the middle of Switzerland, and the guy with the yellow vest knows me. He's buying Bitcoin for his daughter. He just got married. I walk to the beach in Italy, and someone swimming off the beach yells at me, and they know me. I walk into a room full of billionaires, they know me. I walk to a bar, and the guys at the bar turn around, and they know me. This happens in Uruguay. It happens in Mexico, it happens in Brazil, it happens in Italy, it happens in Greece, happens in Switzerland, it happens in London, happens in New York City, happens in Asia, right? Why, right? Bitcoin's a sports team with hundreds of millions, arguably 400 million fans, and they're all rooting for the same thing. And when Bitcoin's doing well, they're all in a good mood. It's like their blood sugar's up. When Bitcoin's doing poorly, they're in a surly mood, their blood sugar is down. But, give me another example of a team that's got 400 million passionate fans and they're all winning or losing together, right? What's making news on Sunday afternoon? Bitcoin. When there's a scare of a war, what's crashing? What can you sell? Bitcoin. When you decide the war's not coming, what can you buy? Bitcoin. What is there to tweet about, talk about? Bitcoin. What do you cover on YouTube on a Saturday or Sunday or midnight on the East Coast? Bitcoin, right? Everybody's got something to say about it. What is it? Well, and why is it? Well, first of all, it's the most widely held asset in the world because it's a standardized economic unit. Right? I mean, maybe we own watches, but we own different watches. Maybe we own buildings, we own different buildings, right? Maybe your building is worth more in Paris, but how does that help my building in Los Angeles? We're not on the same team. We're not on team building, right? We're not on team watch. And good luck, trying to invest in like Apple stock in Nigeria, right? And so what is Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin's the economic solution to everybody. It's a global economic solution to billions of people, right? And what does it become? It's become cool. Bitcoin's cool. It's useful. It's global. It's standard. Who's the last person to standardize something? Well, I mean, people have been standardizing things for thousands of years, but you might know the name of one company, one Standard Oil. John D. Rockefeller launched Standard Oil And it became such a household world. In fact, just about every oil company in America came from John D. Rockefeller's company. Half the oil companies in Europe came from John D. Rockefeller's company. We all zoned out and we thought oil. We forgot about the standard part. The standard part was, this is the oil that's not going to blow up in your face and set your house on fire. This is the oil that's actually got clean chemical properties. Standardizing energy was the most powerful idea in the 20th century. Made the richest man in the 20th century and created every single energy company. But what is this? This is standard capital. This is standard wealth for 8 billion people. It's, you know, so tell me the next standard, right? Give me another asset that goes up in value, not down in value, that's standardized, open to, and global to everybody, right? And the answer is, there is no second best, right? There's a standard investment brand. It's called Bitcoin. It's always interesting. It's egalitarian. You can buy $1 billion worth of it, and it's a pretty good idea to buy $1 billion, but you can buy $23 worth of it. And if you look at the wealthy in the world, they buy buildings, but you know, how's a cab driver in Nigeria supposed to buy a fraction of a building, right? How does it impact the other 7.9 billion people that can't afford a building, right? This is egalitarian capital, egalitarian property, and it's prestigious, right? So this is the ultimate luxury brand. You know, people used to buy the nice watch, so they figure they could sell it if they ever needed to eat or pawn it, right? But you'd much rather have Bitcoin in your watch. Bitcoin's the best digital commodity. There's no second best digital commodity. What is a digital commodity? It's the only crypto in the world recognized as an asset without an issuer by all major regulators. By all major regulators. Okay, the Chinese recognize it. The Russians recognize it. Right, the enemies of the U.S. recognize it. You know, in Singapore, in the UAE, in the U.S., in Brazil, everywhere. This is the one thing everybody recognizes. So the question is why? Why? It's not the first. It's not the only. There's 2.5 million copies. Why? It's because of the Immaculate Conception. What is the Immaculate Conception? By the way, it's such a simple idea, and yet everybody that's copied Bitcoin hasn't got this simple idea in their head. Satoshi created a way. He gave it away. And he went away. Walked away. That's the idea. There's not a single major company in the world where someone created the company, gave it to the world, and walked off. And in fact, if you look at every other crypto asset, there is no Satoshi, right? In fact, the way you know that they're not commodities is they're all arguing that they're commodities. Satoshi's not arguing anything. Satoshi went away, gave it to you. Right? And this is the essence of it. If something's going to be a commodity, there can't be a beneficiary. Satoshi gave up control of the protocol. Satoshi gave up the Satoshi coins. Satoshi stopped trying to influence the network. It was a gift to the world. That's what makes it an asset without an issuer. If you go and make a list of the next 100 cryptos and you go down the list, you're going to be hard-pressed to find that. But that's a simple asset test. By the way, it's a lot easier than the Howey test. You know, if you wanted to figure out whether you're a security, if you created something, did you give it all away to someone else? Did you never sell it? And are you gone and not arguing over it? And then maybe it is. So I have simple advice for someone that wants to create a digital commodity, right? Give it away and walk away. Bitcoin is not just the best digital commodity. It's the best commodity, right? Bitcoin's the only commodity in the world, that's digital. Everything else is a physical commodity. And because it's digital, it's fixed in supply. Everything else is physical, therefore not fixed in supply. That makes Bitcoin superior to gold, and gold is the king of commodities. You know, when I started my career at DuPont, commodity was a dirty word. Every single business decision made by the DuPont Corporation was to escape a commodity business and create a specialty business. Nobody wanted to manufacture or sell commodities. And the reason why is they knew they were all eventually driven to zero profitability, or every commodity provider eventually has to produce the commodity at a loss in order just to run their capital. And so commodities are awful investments, and gold is simply, the least worst of an awful investment. Why is Bitcoin the best? It's global, it's digital, it's programmable, it's inelastic, it's durable, it's divisible, it's portable. These are all the things that every other commodity is not. Okay, well, the numbers don't lie. I can give you words and rhetoric, but look at the last 4 years. In an inflationary environment, gold is up 13%, Bitcoin is up 394%. Any good investor will tell you all physical commodities make poor investments. Gold's just the least worst. Now, for those of you who are Bitcoin advocates and you go and you talk to people, right, what you'll find is the very controversial narrative of Bitcoin is this digital currency. That gets everybody racked around the axle because they think, well, it's competing with the yen and the dollar and the euro and the ruble and the CNY and the like, and it's a medium exchange, and it needs to be legal tender, and it shouldn't be taxed. It becomes a very controversial thing. If you put that aside for a second, that's the ugly narrative, and you go to the bad narrative. Bitcoin is digital gold. It's sort of true, but it's not a very good narrative. Why? Because if you talk to 1,000 billionaires and you say, well, how many of you made $1 billion investing in gold? And the answer is 0. And if you go to 1,000 wealthy families and say, now that you're wealthy, are you going to go buy $1 billion of gold? The answer is no. And you say, well, we've got digital gold. It's great. It moves at the speed of light. It's programmable. You can teleport it. It's great. And they go, well, that's nice, but I don't own any gold. Okay, I can't find anybody that owns gold. The people that are advocates of gold don't own gold. Peter Schiff, on the record, has spent 15 years advocating gold. And when you ask him, Peter, do you own any gold? It's like, oh, no, I don't own gold. It's a very small part of my portfolio. Okay, so find me someone that actually owns gold that you could even debate on the topic. And the answer is it just seems to be 1% to 3% oddity, in any portfolio. So, yeah, Bitcoin is the best commodity, but the truth is all commodities are dogs, and Bitcoin actually fixed the commodity. But that word commodity is a dirty word. Every intelligent business person, every intelligent investor knows that you should run as fast. Run, don't walk away from commodities. So what is Bitcoin really? Bitcoin's the only scarcity. It's not a commodity. A commodity is something you can create infinite amounts of, and anybody's allowed to create infinite amounts of and dump it on the market. And if you want to hold, $1 billion of soybeans for 100 years, that's probably not going to be generational wealth for your granddaughter, right? Pretty obvious why. But $1 billion of gold won't be generational wealth for your granddaughter either. Bitcoin's the first absolutely scarce commodity in human history. So you have to say it represents an entirely new asset class. It's not an equity, it's not a property, it's not a commodity, it's something different, it's new. Given the fact that it's new, there's nothing to compare it to. So you got to ask the question, if there is no scarce commodity in the world, what is scarce? Find me anything that's scarce. And I got the hourglass up here to make a point. No amount of money will buy you more time or more Bitcoin. So if you consider the nature of the universe as a physicist, the one thing that's scarce is time, right? No politician can make more of it. No capitalist can manufacture more of it. No AI bot can create more of it. Time is the true, ultimate, scarce yardstick, right? That's how the universe works. That's how God makes the universe work. Einstein had a lot to say about it. Physicists have a lot to say about it. What have we done with Bitcoin? We have bottled time in a Bitcoin, right? The process of proof of work mining is, in essence, digitally transforming time into an asset. Our goal was to create a digital money, but now it gives new meaning to the phrase, time is money. How do I actually create digital time, digital scarcity, and then how do I put it, on a hardware wallet? How do I move it? How do I compute with it? Right? So scarcity it's very underwhelming to say, oh, Bitcoin is like, it's digital currency, or it's digital property, or it's digital gold, or it's digital something, because what it really is this digital time, this constant, right? If I give you 100 trillion quadrillion dollars, you won't get more than 21 million Bitcoin. If I give you all the money in the world and you crank the miner up, we know how fast Bitcoin is coming out every 10 minutes, right? We have created the perfect monetary asset because we have figured out how to duplicate the benefits and the characteristics of time. And ultimately, when you measure your life and everything in your life, you have to measure it against time, because time's the one thing you're not getting back, no matter how rich you are. Now, people oftentimes, they try to buy land, right? Land is the scarce asset. They're not making any more beachfront property, right? I want to buy land, and the truth is, in the 20th century, if you're a rich family and you didn't make money on technology, then you made money on property. And the property you bought was the middle of London or Paris or New York, or you bought some beachfront in the Hamptons or Palm Beach or something, but probably you bought very desirable commercial real estate in the middle of the city. But, it's kind of a bromide. People will say things, oh yeah, well, I guess commodities can be manufactured, but land, they're not making that anymore. They're not making any more land, right? When Mark Twain said that? Okay, look at the picture here. The truth is, they are making more land. This is Boston over the course of 300 years. Half of Boston was made. I live in Miami Beach. 3/4 of Miami Beach was manufactured in the last 100 years. It's all made, right? They dredged it. Dubai, they make land. Amsterdam, Rotterdam, they made the land. The truth is, given enough money, you can make land, and if you want it, you'd be surprised how much of it you make, right? Most people don't think about this, but at the end of the day, storing all of your economic energy in land is not truly going to be effective, because it's going to inflate, and it's going to be impaired by a whole set of other challenges. So Bitcoin's the best property. What's the best property? Bitcoin's the best property. What's the second best property? There is no second best property, right? This is the greatest digital city in the world. There's 220 million inhabitants there right now. What's the second best digital city in the world? Right? There isn't a second best city in the world. Why is this so powerful? It's global. Anybody can go there. It's digital. You can zap there on a mobile phone, and there's billions of mobile devices. It's open. This is a city that's got no mayor to tell you what you can't do. And on the other hand, everybody can zap there with their capital when they want. It's permissionless. And you don't have to buy a building. And how many people can afford an apartment in New York? Most people can't afford an apartment in New York. You can buy a fraction of a piece of property in this city. It's totally divisible, and this is the immortal city. Maybe New York is there a couple 100 years. This city could be there 10,000 years. It's a virtual city. And, we talk about sustainability, but sustainable here means there's no painting, there's no tornado going to hit this city. There's not a flood insurance obligation on this city. You don't have to worry about, neighbors getting together and creating a zoning ordinance. This city will last, and this property in this city will last. Bitcoin's the best property, right? Why would you buy it? You would buy it because it's a heck of a lot better idea than buying an apartment to Airbnb for the rest of your life. What are you going to do when you die? You're going to leave instructions for your grandchildren on how to operate the Airbnb? And where are the instructions for how to actually convince the mayor to not tax away or rent control your Airbnb? One of the problems with property is it's inherently corrupting in the physical world, because if you're not a political actor and you own property, then the politicians take it away from you. And that convinces you that you have to then influence the political process and take control of the government, whether it's the city, the county, the state, right? Entire states were created, right? Why is Las Vegas here? Why are you in the city? You know why you're here? It's because they drove all the way down to across the state line. And when they were out of California, they said, okay, this is a good state, and we'll put the city here in this part of the desert. If the city had been a few miles on the other side of the highway, there'd be no Las Vegas. Everything that's going on here would have been shut down, regulated away, made illegal, or taxed away sometime in the last 50 years. So the problem with physical property is you have to become the political actor, or another political actor will just take it away from you. And there's no middle ground. And at the point that you're no longer politically capable of defending your property, when your children or grandchildren aren't as well-wired and aren't as politically sophisticated or charming or charismatic as you are, then the county, the city, the state, the whatever, they just crank your property taxes, expropriate your property, turn it into an airport or a school or whatever, utility line, and someone writes a little obituary saying, oops, third generation, they lost the family farm. I guess they weren't as smart as their grandparents were. They probably deserved it, right? And that's the best thing about this property. Here's a city you can move to, a cyber Manhattan. There's never going to be more than 276 to the third blocks. 276 cubed, that's the number I want to plant in your head. If Bitcoin was a city in cyberspace, it would be 276 blocks wide, 276 blocks high, 276 blocks deep. When you buy Bitcoin, you're buying one of those blocks. That's all there is. 276 is the cube root of 21 million to the nearest integer. There's no second best property. But again, as I say, property's really, it's underselling what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is much better than digital property. Bitcoin's the best capital asset. Capital, what is capital? Pure economic energy. Bitcoin's digital capital. It is the first occurrence of pure economic energy in the history of humanity. If we look at every other asset, there's no other asset. There's no second best capital asset. There's no asset that represented pure economic energy. The closest thing we have to it is the myth of gold and the idea that, if I'm successful in business, I'll basically convert that success into gold. When I'm a powerful king, when my kingdom is successful, it'll be the kingdom of gold. When my city is successful, it'll be the city of gold, right? The gold standard, right? We talk about gold, but gold was never pure economic energy. Just ask the Spanish when they had all their gold wash up in Queen Elizabeth's harbor during the Great Wars, and she took it all. And then they lost the war in the Netherlands because she took their gold, because their gold had to be shipped on wooden ships. It wasn't quite energy at all. It was a little bit too clumsy. And gold, of course, as we talked about, it's a commodity, it's inflationary. The Spanish had hyperinflation, in the 16th century, after they brought all the gold back from the New World, 500% inflation. They collapsed their entire civilization. They destroyed their empire because they found too much gold. Must not have been pure economic energy the way it worked out. The problem with every other asset, and the primary capital assets are equity, credit, bonds that is, currency, and property. They're all impaired by physical constraints. The physical constraints lead to political constraints, lead to entropic effects, chaos, disorder, fragility, risk. Bitcoin's better than that. Bitcoin's immortal, immutable, indestructible. The whole idea of Bitcoin is I create an asset which doesn't live in the physical world, that lives in the virtual world. And because it's immortal, I mean, immortal is a pretty big word. I mean, what's the difference between inflating the gold supply 2% a year and inflating the Bitcoin supply 0% a year over 10,000 years? Well, the useful life of gold, the half-life of money in gold, or half-life of capital in gold is 30 years. It's a difference between dying in 30 years or living forever. That's when people tell you 2% inflation doesn't matter, well, 0% inflation is live forever or immortal, and 2% inflation is die or half die in 30 years, die fully in 60 to 70 years. It really does matter. So the idea of immortality in your energy is pretty critical. Immutable, right? Is someone going to corrupt it? Indestructible? Is an act of God, a force majeure, going to destroy it? Everything else, all these other capital assets, they suffer from those risks. And because Bitcoin doesn't, it's inevitable. It's an inevitable idea. Why? Look at Bitcoin man here. Not stupid, right? People aren't stupid. I mean, go back 10,000 years and then find everyone that disagreed with you on every ideology and every religion, and then ask the question what they all agree on. And they generally all agreed that they didn't want to lose their stuff, right? Just about everybody, whether they're socialist, communist, capitalist, every possible ideology, they all agree that generally being wealthier or having economic power is better than not having economic power. Now, there's a few people that kind of forsake all their property and surrender their economic power. They end up losing control of the government and lose control of the society, and they certainly lose control of the armies, because one of the lessons of history is if you can't pay your soldiers, then they're going to mutiny, and then your empire is going to collapse. So in this particular case, every self-interested human being that's going to compete in a Darwinian world is going to agree that they want immutable, immortal, indestructible capital, right? Who doesn't? So back to the numbers. What's the best capital asset? Bitcoin. What's the second best capital asset? Well, actually, the S&P is the modern surrogate for cost of capital. So that's been the case at least for 30 years, probably 30, 40 years since the Vanguard 500 and since SPY was launched by State Street. And so if you're looking for the cost of capital, what is the cost of capital? It's kind of like the rate at which your capital has to return for you to not get poorer. And it's kind of interesting here, 50% over 4 years is about 12% a year. The cost of capital is about 12%. If I had to guess, at what rate does the US dollar money supply expand? Probably 12%, because that's kind of copying it. I mean, probably the dollar supply expands a little bit faster. That probably slightly underperforms the monetary inflation rate. But if you had to pick one metric and say, what's the metric that gives you a sense of how rapidly the world currency supply is expanding in dollars, probably the S&P 500. That's the cost of capital. And as you can see, when you have inflation, the money finds its way into the strongest asset, and it does not find its way into the weakest asset. So this is another way to see inflation. This is last 4 years. And what do you see here? You see that when the money supply expands, perhaps 50, 60%, I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't expand 60%. I don't think we measure it, by the way. I think that all of the official measurements of M2, I think all of them are incomplete, imperfect, in the same way that unemployment statistics are imperfect, in the same way that GDP statistics are imperfect, in the same way that inflation is imperfect. They're just synthetic numbers that a certain organization decides to focus on. But what's the story here? The story here is that, that bonds don't hold value, right? They're awful capital assets. Silver doesn't work. Gold doesn't keep up with the cost of capital. The NASDAQ, interesting, it underperforms the S&P. Why? Well, sometimes you get some big winners with technology and sometimes you don't, but maybe the S&P is a more broad index and just got a little bit less of a sharp edge to it, less risk in it. There's a lot of low-risk businesses in the S&P 500. And then obviously what we see is Bitcoin's the only asset that exceeds the cost of capital. Another way to say that is everything else is dilutive. You invest in anything other than Bitcoin, you're destroying capital, you're destroying wealth, right? You invest in the S&P 500, it's a conventional capital asset. You won't look stupid. You're probably still losing a bit of wealth, but nobody will notice because the rest of the society's using that as the benchmark. But if you're not doing the 50%, then you're running a hedge fund underperforming the S&P 500. You're destroying value. Most of them underperform the S&P 500, and they destroy value. What's the best capital asset? Bitcoin. What's the second best? There is no second best. That makes Bitcoin the best treasury asset. Treasury meaning you got a company, a private company, a public company, you've got a treasury. A treasury means you've got a country, you've got a city, you have a municipality, you have an institution, you have an endowment, you have a treasury. Well, most operating companies surrender their capital to avoid shareholder dilution, right? Because if they hold the capital and they invest it in T-bills, they're going to get 3% after tax against a 12% cost of capital per year. And so you hold $100 billion of capital, you destroy $9 billion of shareholder value a year. Berkshire Hathaway's got $160 billion of capital. That's a $15 billion a year cost in order to use that as a treasury asset. Cash and credit are both dilutive. Bitcoin is the first treasury asset that's accretive. That is, you carry $100 billion of Bitcoin, it goes up 40% a year. You're earning $40 billion of accretion a year instead of $9 billion of dilution a year. That means Bitcoin changes the rules of modern corporate finance. Finance for the past 50 years in B school, is taught like this. You have to operate on the P&L to strip away all volatility. We want you to pursue the Microsoft model. We're going to sell you 3-year enterprise agreements, and they're fixed for the next 3 years. We'll renew them every 3 years. The CFO of Microsoft can predict the quarterly results 12 months in advance, plus or minus 50 basis points or 100 basis points. The only moving part is the cost, and the costs are controlled by the corporation. So modern finance says you're a good CFO if you strip the volatility off the P&L, and then you're a good CFO if you return all the capital to the shareholders via buyback or a dividend, no matter how tax inefficient it might be. And then if you want to be a really good CFO, you borrow $50 billion and you give that back to the shareholders, so you actually go to negative working capital. Well, so, and that's happening where? It's happening at Apple, it's happening at Meta, it's happening most places. Why? Well, partly it's happening because you need to get your EPS to go up by 12% a year if you're going to beat the 12% cost of capital and make your stock a store of value. And if you're organically only growing 1, 2, 3% a year, which is people do the math. If the economy grows 2 or 3% a year and you need your equity to grow or your cash flows to grow 12% a year per share, the only way to do it is to borrow money and buy back your equity and lever up. But at that point, you go to negative capital. Okay, so if you hold positive capital, that's what that's what bonds do to you. And if you hold negative capital, now you're fragile. You have one bad quarter, you go bankrupt. Right? So the problem here is that the treasury asset that's conventional is toxic, and it's killing the companies. The corporate life expectancy is 10, 15, 20 years. Okay, and we've simply accepted the fact that our company's going to die in 20 years. But the reason they're dying in 20 years is you're injecting poison into their veins. If they just stopped injecting the poison, they'd live hundreds of years, right? It's a very basic insight. So what's the way to flip that? The way to flip it is you stop injecting toxic assets onto your balance sheet and you actually put accretive or healthy assets onto a corporate balance sheet. This is what happened to MicroStrategy since we adopted a Bitcoin strategy in 4 years. You've all lived these 4 years. SAP, IBM, Salesforce, and Oracle, that's what they do. Oracle looks like the winner. They beat the cost of capital of 50%, right, the S&P. Oracle's the winner. The rest are losing. They're not keeping up. Then you've got Amazon, Netflix. They can't keep up with the cost of capital. Apple's barely tracking the S&P. Meta, Microsoft, Google, looking a little bit better. And then you see where the assets are. Any company that simply had a large portion of their assets in Bitcoin is getting 435%. MicroStrategy levered up by borrowing cheap debt and buying Bitcoin, and therefore we do better. Now, if you had asked someone, is a $500 million company growing 0% a year in August of 2020, are they going to beat every one of these companies' performance? People would have said, no stinking way, right? And the truth is, it's not us. It's Bitcoin. Stop bleeding the patient. The patient mortality rates plunge when you stop bleeding the patient and when you sterilize the equipment you use to operate on them, right? It's basic medicine. Eliminate the toxicity. So what's the best tech investment? Bitcoin's the best tech investment. The best tech investment, an investment in something everybody needs, no one can stop, few understand. Apple in 2010, Amazon, Facebook, Google. Everybody needs it, nobody can stop it, people don't understand it. If people agree with you when you say, I like Bitcoin, that means it's not a good investment anymore. You understand? At the point when it's not controversial and everybody agrees with you, everybody will own it, the price will be 100x. You won't be able to afford to buy 1% of what you want, right? You want to know it. You don't want them to understand it. Let them take 10 years to figure it out, because that's how you 100x. What's the best new investment idea? Bitcoin's the best new investment idea. Okay, financial advisors, they're looking for an alternative investment that's going to provide performance without direct correlation to risk, right? And they've been stuck in a rut for 30 years, right? This is JP Morgan's family office survey. What do people own? They own some private equity, some public equity, some real estate, some cash, some bonds, some commodities, infrastructure. You notice commodities are the least popular. A lot of people just think it's a no-fly zone. The other stuff are pretty conventional. But coming back to this chart, you know, I think this is probably also JP Morgan. None of these assets are beating the monetary inflation rate. You just feel smart because you tell yourself the inflation rate is the consumer inflation. But for the most part, the screaming winners are 1% better. Nobody's got a great solution, right? You can either do really awful, or you can just, you know, keep your wealth without generating any more. Nobody can outperform inflation. So what do they invest in? Well, these family offices, this is capital weighted. They put 45% of their capital into alternative investments. They don't want to hold public equity. Their view is public equity is fully valued. They certainly don't want to own bonds, right? So much for the 60-40 portfolio. Their portfolio is not 60-40. They want something else. And something else is more like real estate or something private or some special situation. But what's the best alternative investment? Bitcoin's the best alternative investment, right? What's the second best? There is no second best. Right? There's hundreds of thousands of financial advisors, and every wealthy family in the world is looking for the best alternative asset. Okay? Why is Bitcoin the best alternative asset? Well, just a little bit of inspection will will demonstrate that it's uncorrelated to currencies, corporations, or counterparties. No corporate execution risk, no currency debasement risk, and none of the counterparty risk that comes with bonds and credit and the like. What is it? It's global, it's non-sovereign, it's a store of value. It's liquid. You know, buying a building in San Francisco is not liquid. You can't buy it in a minute. You can't sell it on the weekend. And the truth is, and this is the irony of ironies, everybody thinks Bitcoin is risky because it's volatile. It's volatile because it's not risky. It's the lowest risk thing you can own in the world because it's the thing that has the most risk stripped away. The reason it's volatile, it's that it's the most desirable, most accessible thing, which means that everybody else is expressing their sentiment and their emotions every minute of the day, everywhere in the world, however they wish to. And why is it the best alternative asset? Because it's the longest duration asset, right? You buy a building on the beach, it'll last for 30 years. Do you want to buy a building in Manhattan that's good for 50 years or whatever? Or do you want to buy the granite or the schist under Manhattan that's been there for 200 million years? Buy 100 blocks of granite in Manhattan, right? Don't get caught up in the building, the zoning, the corporation, the parties, the conferences, and the whatever. When Howard Hughes came to Las Vegas, he looked around and he bought all the land. He bought so much land that they're still building on the land that Howard Hughes bought, and he's been dead 50 years. Summerlin, it's all Howard Hughes. Everything he did, he looked and he was like, well, if this is going to work, I'm just going to buy all the land because I don't know which casino will work. Right? The land's still here. The casinos are gone. The restaurants are gone. The politicians have come and gone. Every other good idea is gone. They built, you know, it used to be the Mirage was cool. Treasure Island was cool, the Bellagio was cool, the Wynn was cool, the Encore was cool. Here we are in some cool place. The land's still here. Buy the land. That's the alternative asset. And of course, that makes Bitcoin the best asset class. It's an entire ecosystem of products, services, companies, securities, derivatives, and professions. It's the global digital asset network. It's the internet of money. The securities, or Bitcoin-backed securities, are being issued worldwide, everywhere, at an accelerating rate. This year, right, you saw an explosion of spot ETFs in the US, but look at all the ETFs in Hong Kong. Look at all the ETFs in Europe. This is the beginning, right? You're going to see more and more and more. Every one of these companies is joining the ecosystem. They're securitizing. And it's not just this MicroStrategy security, options are security. There are options and derivatives on the securities. There are bonds on the securities. This is exploding. It'll continue. Every Bitcoin miner is a security. One day there'll be 1,000 securities or 10,000 securities, all backed by Bitcoin. Same with corporate treasuries. Bitcoin treasuries are growing rapidly, right? They keep this chart up every month. It's never declining. The chart's not ever decreasing. It only goes one way. Bitcoin is a capital ratchet. It's a one-way ratchet, right? Archimedes said, give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I can move the world. Bitcoin is the place to stand. The leverage is coming via all these securities, all these corporate treasuries, right? And the leverage is getting to be extreme. MicroStrategy showed you how you can actually generate performance with leverage, but we're just the first, we're not the only. You could do it 10,000 more times. The more leverage that gets put on this network, the bigger the network's going to get. You know, and a final few points, Bitcoin's the best bank. It's the it's a savings account for billions of people. No company, no currency, no country, no agenda. It's egalitarian, it's open. There is no second best bank. Bitcoin's the best path to peace. It's open, permissionless, transparent, decentralized. It's a fair and equitable way to settle differences between global counterparties that have conflicting interests. What's the second best way, right? The second best way maybe is we shoot each other up, right, with weapons, but this is the best way. There's no second best way. It's not just the path to peace, it's the path to prosperity, right? This is a global monetary network giving equal property rights to all economic classes in every nation. What's the second best way to do this? There's no second best way. Where are we now? Bitcoin's on a path of evolution from the idealist to the institutions. The first dozen years, it was the era of the idealists, the cypherpunks, you know, the libertarians, the entrepreneurs, the crypto cowboys. Right? You know the story. It's been written about. People will probably make many more movies about it. What was 2020 to 2024? The crazy years, right? Starting with COVID, ending with the approval of the spot ETFs. It was the crazy years. What's going to happen to crypto? Who's going to control crypto? Will it be regulated, right? Will Bitcoin be banned? Will it be hacked? Will it be copied? We resolved that in those 4 years, and now we've come out of the crazy years. Now we're in the era of institutional adoption. Institutions, corporations, and investors are going to define the future of this network from 1 trillion to 100 trillion. And that's appropriate, right? From 2008 to 2020, the network went from 0 to 150 billion. And between 2020 and 2024, it went from the 150 billion to 1.4 trillion. So you can see how this is lining up. Of course, institutions and corporations are going to join this network. They have all the money. It's a monetary network, right? At the end of the day, you have a monetary network, then people with all the money, that run the money, that need the money, are going to join the network. So in summary, look, Bitcoin's the best idea. There's no more powerful idea than the digital transformation of capital, right? What are you going to do with this? Well, you're going to improve your life, your family, your product, your service, your company, your institution, your government, or your world, right? Improve them all, right? It's pretty straightforward how you do it. You've got pure economic energy. It's not the solution to every problem in the world. It's just the solution to half the problems in the world. But every other problem in the world, you're going to need economic energy or economic power to solve it. And this is how you harness and channel that power. No force on earth can stop an idea whose time has come. This is an idea, its time has come, it's unstoppable. And so I'm going to end with the observation that Bitcoin is the best. The best what? The best. It's the best. It's the best idea. Once you've found the best idea, everything else you can invest your time, which is scarce, or your energy, which is scarce, everything you can invest your time and energy in is dilutive, everything else. So what do I suggest? I suggest study Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, build on Bitcoin, advocate Bitcoin, defend Bitcoin, and then you can enjoy Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, there is no second best. Thank you.